Good morning, Nikki Burnett here. Today's Taste Life Nutrition Radio and podcast streaming live on KUHSdenver.com. Today it's just me, and so I always enjoy getting to talk to you about the things that I want to talk about and nerding out a little bit. So today's going to be, I think, a fun conversation, but hopefully informative, right? We have this view of life that as we age, symptoms arise and there's nothing that we can do about it. And I think that is, a pretty unhealthy way of looking at life. I think that I know we have a lot of control over our symptoms. We have a lot of control over how our life expresses as symptoms and as disease. And, taking that power and really grabbing hold of it, I think is really important for health, for mental and emotional health, for moving forward, for if you're already struggling, for moving out of that struggle, right? And finding the people who can help you in that struggle, right? And help guide you out of it, because that's, a lot of times we need guidance, right? I know I need guidance all the time. This is why I have an accountant. This is why I have a bookkeeper, because those are not my things. But I digress a little bit. So today, though, we always start the show with gratitude. I truly believe that gratitude can change the world. We have a lot to be grateful for, and we have a lot of things that could help, a little change as well. So, I think right now I'm grateful for collaboration. I have some collaborations that I'm doing, that I'm working on, that are moving forward, that are building and growing, and it's exciting for me because I get to impact more people, and I'm also impacted by more people, and that's really what I want. I want to grow, I want to learn, I want to give what I know that I have to give, but also, if I can continue to share what I know, what I have learned, to as many people as possible, and continue to learn, because the science changes all the time, then that's what's really important to me. And this is it's all about working together. And so I know it's a little bit vague right now, and that's okay. We'll move further. As things progress, I will continue to reveal a little bit more about what's going on. But it's a really exciting time for me, for the business, and I think for a lot of people. So anyway, specifically today, we want to talk about neuroinflammation and cognitive health. I think that is often we take brain function, neurological function, and we separate it from the rest of the body. We also, thanks, Henry. Didn't turn any of my stuff on. All right, there we go. Wow, when you're running late in the morning, things always seem to just kind of go a little bit wonky. So anyway, as it happens, most every show, Henry has to tell me something that I'm doing wrong, but that's okay. That's what it's all about. I'm here to give information. He's here to run the techie stuff. So this is good. Anyway, we tend to separate our neurological health from our physical health. We separate our mental and emotional health, I think, from our physical health, as well as from our neurological health. And really what we need to do is we really need to bring this all together. It's all related. None of this stuff works in a vacuum. It's not intended to work in a vacuum. This is why, it's good to have our focus, but we have to always remember that everything works together. And so one of the things that, just to sort of start the conversation off, and to give what I believe is a good example of this, is when we are struggling with neurological symptoms, whatever that is, right? It could be as simple as, which is not simple, but brain fog. It could be a tired brain. You don't have the capacity to continue to read, or you get tired when you're driving, things like that you think, well, it's not that big a deal, but really it can be. If you're struggling for words, which happens to me periodically, if there are these symptoms that can happen, and we take them essentially in a vacuum, right? It's something else. But what if that there's the connection, we talk about the gut-brain connection. What if part of the problem of our neurological issues, of our symptoms, whatever it is that we're struggling with, actually is an infection or a toxic exposure or a mold exposure that is creating the problem, that is where we have our gut and our brain are connected. We have our vagus nerve that connects the two. Our microbiome speaks to our brain and vice versa through the vagus nerve. And so when we start to peel back the layers and really try to understand symptoms, we always want to, and you hear me say this all the time, but we always want to understand the root cause. We always want to look deeper. It's not just happening just because. It's not happening because of age. I mean, sure, life happens and things build up, toxic exposures build up, things happen in the body. It's going to happen. But we also have the ability, just because we're aging doesn't mean we don't have the ability to mitigate some of these things, right? So we also can blame it on, I hear a lot of people say, well, it's just my bad luck. I don't believe that's the case either. I don't believe in luck, but I think that, when we talk about the role of our own power, of our own decision making, of the choices that we make, these are the things that impact everything about who we are. Okay, so say we are, again, going back to having these neurological symptoms, we do a GI panel. Now, there are lots of really great panels that we can do, but we do a GI panel. We find that there is significant infection, and we address that infection. What happens often is then the neurological symptoms will go away. Now, that it makes it really simplistic, but the point is to create sort of that story around the symptoms that we're struggling with and looking deeper at what is actually creating the problem in the first place, right? And so what are the different things that can create neuroinflammation? And so I've got my, kind of my list here, but, one of the things, if we're looking at, so if we're looking at lifestyle, if we look at food specifically, the things that we see in our environment as far as food's concerned, we've got pesticides, we've got herbicides, we have these toxicants, we also have foods that are high in sugar. If we're not eating good, healthy, real food, all of these things, stress can create blood sugar dysregulation. Too much unhealthy sugar can create blood sugar dysregulation. This blood sugar dysregulation is really, really hard on the brain. And so what are the numbers? I should have brought this with me, but the numbers of diabetics as well as pre-diabetics that are out there in the world at this point is, I don't know if it's 60% of the population or something ridiculous, maybe more. And so when we're struggling with this type of dysregulation, it certainly has a huge impact on brain function. So if you are in a situation where you know that your blood glucose levels are too high, your A1C is too high, and you're struggling with the fatigue, the mental fatigue, the brain fog, the inability to think clearly and to speak clearly and the searching for words, consider the fact that you need to get your blood sugar regulated in order to allow your brain to function properly. And there's something that I want to hit on too, because as we're talking about blood sugar dysregulation, brain health, and aging, here's what I've seen. I've seen that as we hit a certain age, it's right around 65 or 70, it seems to me that it is okay in allopathic medicine to have blood sugar levels higher than normal and A1C levels higher than normal. I see that as a problem. We don't want elevated blood sugar levels. And just because we're aging doesn't mean it's okay for our blood sugar levels to go higher. Doesn't mean that it's normal for them to go higher. So we need to be really, really aware of our blood glucose levels. And if they are elevated, if you've got blood glucose levels, in the hundreds, and some are even higher than that, but in the hundreds, this is problematic, it's inflammatory, and it's detrimental and damaging to brain health, brain function, and cognitive function. It's just the way that it is. So that is certainly an issue. We want to regulate our blood sugar. We want to eat well. We were talking about this the other day, how food really is so simple and so basic, but we've made it really, really hard. So it's about good, healthy meat, good, healthy fat, good, healthy plants. It's really kind of what it is. Fruits, vegetables, animals that are treated well, that are actually pasture raised and not full of chemicals, and foods that they don't eat. Fat. It really is very basic stuff. So taking out the processed foods, the high carb foods, the bars. We have, oh my goodness, the breakfast bars and the protein bars and the sports bars and all of these bars that are so full of sugar and processed foods. We've got to get away from those. Just eat real food. So other things that can create an issue with neuroinflammation, or can create neuroinflammation, is going to be circulatory and oxygen deficiencies. So how does that happen? Well, if our cardiovascular system is not functioning properly, if we have inflammation that is impeding cardiovascular function, it's certainly going to impact brain health. So we've got to get oxygen to the brain. So there are things that we can do, certainly, supplements that we can take, again, lifestyle factors that we can modify to allow for more oxygen to the brain. Exercise. We've got to exercise. Increasing taking supplements that increase nitric oxide, right? This is healthy for the cardiovascular system. It's healthy for bringing oxygen to the brain. If the brain is not getting enough oxygen, it's going to let you know, right? With symptoms, with brain fog, with all of these things that we keep talking about. So another thing that we want to make sure that we consider, so inflammation is really the key to all of this. So if we have neurological inflammation, we're certainly going to have inflammation in other places. But what can cause the inflammation, again, are some of these things, but we want to include food sensitivities. Now, we want to be really careful when we talk about food sensitivities, because in a lot of cases, not in all cases, in a lot of cases, food sensitivities are a symptom. It's an immune reaction to the food when the immune system is upregulated, and it's reacting to the food when it shouldn't be. But there are certain foods that we can have sensitivities to that are genetic predispositions, right? We talk about epigenetics a lot. It's sort of the best thing. It's what gives us power, is our epigenome. So our epigenome, just real quickly, if you're new to the show, we have our genetic makeup, and then we have our epigenetic makeup. And so our epigenome are locations on top of genes that turn on and off based on lifestyle. So they regulate gene expression. So it's the most amazing thing, because we can regulate our own gene expression based on the choices that we make every day. The food that we put in our body, the sleep that we get, the rest, the exercise, or the lack thereof of all of these, right? So we can have a positive impact, and we can have a negative impact. And these epigenetic variants are those that are passed on for generations. So not only does it impact us and our future health, but it impacts, for those who are looking to grow their family, expand their family, it can impact generations ahead. So we have so much control over our own health. We have so much control over the health of future generations. It's really big. It's really big, and it creates this. I mean, it holds us accountable, which is awesome, right? We have free will. It's this beautiful thing. That's what epigenetics is. It's our own free will. And so it's not easy. It's certainly not easy, but it puts us in control, which is the best thing in the world. Now, when we talk about food sensitivities, there are a couple of foods that we can be genetically predisposed to having sensitivities to, which is gluten and dairy. There may be some other ones, but gluten specifically is one that you can see. It shows up in a couple of different places in a genetic report or an epigenetic report, and we're looking at these specific variants, right? And so we can see if you have the potential for gluten sensitivity. We can see if you have the potential for autoimmunity and for gluten sensitivity to push autoimmunity. These are things that we can see in reports, and it's amazing. It's one of my very favorite things, and I'll tell you, in all of the reports that all of the genetic testing that I've done, I've seen one person that didn't have any of the markers for potential gluten sensitivity. So when we talk about gluten being, gluten-free being a fad, it really isn't. Now, I don't want to get too deep into this because, this could be a whole show in and of itself, and it has been. So if you have, you can look in our earlier shows and you can see where we've talked about gluten specifically. So jump back and look at those. But understanding that the gluten that we have here today is not what it used to be. We didn't, prior to, 50, 70 years ago, we weren't spraying our food with pesticides and herbicides, which is going to push, GI dysfunction and autoimmune disease. So we have on our food, we've got all these pesticides and herbicides. We've hybridized the gluten grain to such a degree that the body's like, I don't know what to do with this, and it has the ability to bypass the blood-brain barrier, which is certainly going to create mental and emotional disruptions, right? Neurological issues. So we want to, it's not about just the gluten, but it's about the health of our body. Can we handle it, right? And if our body is already upregulated, if it's already inflamed, gluten is going to push that. So gluten is almost always inflammatory, depending on the situation, right? It's going to be more problematic for some people than it is for others. But if you go over, that, and again, that's more here in the, United States than it is, say, over in Europe, where they don't mess with their grain that much, right? They don't, or at all. So you can get heirloom grains, the heirloom bread made from heirloom grains that is healthy for those who can handle it, right? So I did that myself. I am quite sensitive to gluten, and it comes up as pimples on my face. Went over to Europe and had no issues, and it was an amazing experience. But I come back here and I am starting to have some issues again. So just being really careful with that. And again, it goes back to knowing your body and what it is that you can and can't do, and how you can handle it. And the other thing that I want to look at, though, is dairy. So dairy can be really problematic. What's so interesting about dairy, too, is there is a component to dairy called butyrolin. And we can do testing. So specifically, there's a test called the Neuroimmune that can help us to look at this component of milk, that if we are sensitive to it, it creates an antibody response against brain tissue. And so we have to be super aware of that, because if we're having, these symptoms, these neurological symptoms, and we're still eating dairy, then we need to understand, is dairy actually part of the problem? I have a client who, from early 20s, she's in her 70s now, 80s now, but early 20s, was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. And she healed her autoimmune condition, or she put it into remission based on her lifestyle, a lot of struggle and a lot of work. I mean, it was a significant autoimmune condition that my grandmother actually passed from. And so she put it into remission by lifestyle only. She didn't do drugs, she didn't do any of this stuff. Interestingly, though, this was a long time ago, she was the part of this protocol that she did included raw dairy. And so I see raw dairy for a lot of people, I see it as a good, healthy food. Not for everyone, but for a lot of people, it is a good, healthy food. It's comes from healthy cows. It's not been pasteurized. The body knows what to do with it. It's got its probiotics. It's got its enzymes. It's got, healthy protein in it, healthy fat in it. Raw dairy can be beneficial. And so in her younger years, incorporating raw dairy was beneficial for her as part of her healing journey. And it worked for her. So now she's in her 80s and she's starting to struggle and she's starting to have some cognitive issues. And we want to understand why behind it. And so we did the neural zoomer on her. And what we found was, because she started doing the raw dairy again, what we found was that she's having a reaction to this butyrolphin, which it's creating antibodies against her brain tissue. So the body's dynamic. We need to understand that the body is dynamic. We need to understand that because we can do something in our early years, later on, as we age, as we have more toxins in our environment, more toxins in our body, more things that happen, right? We want to always try to support. But if we get to the point to where we see that, there was one time we could do this and now we can't, we've got to really pay attention to that. And I think it's important to take that to heart, because it was really hard on her. She's like, this is what helped me through in my 20s. But when we see this in her test, that this is creating an antibody response to brain tissue, we have to take it out. It's not even an option unless we just want to continue along the same path, right? And so when we do testing like the neural zoomer, we have the ability to see where the problem is and address the problem, whether it's taking out foods, bringing in specific nutrients, whether it's micronutrients or macronutrients, bringing those in, doing an anti-inflammatory diet, bringing in, polyphenols and different components of foods therapeutically to address the neurological inflammation, to decrease the antibody response that's happening against the brain. This is the fascinating stuff. And I guess I might as well say it while we're talking. So behind me, you'll see a couple of QR codes. The neural zoomer is, there's so many great tests, but the neural zoomer is such a great test, can give us so much information. And so for the show, we're doing 10% discount on the neural zoomer, but I also have a neuroimmune protocol that I think is a really great protocol for addressing neurological inflammation, for addressing the inability to think well, the brain fatigue, these things that can happen so often to us. And so 10% off for both of those. You can either go to the link that's up there, you can click on the QR code, whatever it is that works best for you, but 10% off of both of those. And I put those both on there, but remember that a supplement protocol that I put together, this is a general protocol. It's a great protocol, don't get me wrong, but it is a general protocol. So when we look at the neural zoomer, so if you decide to do the neural zoomer, we can look at that, and then we can be very specific about putting a protocol together for you. That's the goal of testing, is being very specific, very individualized, because we want to make sure that you're getting what you need based on your results, your lifestyle, your goals, and all of those things all together, right? This is why I have a job, because that's what I want to do for myself. It's what I want to do for my family. It's what I want to do for my clients, is to individualize and give you what you need for your situation. That's how we should be treated, right? As the unique people that we are. So, other things that maybe we don't think about it, and I hit on this a little while ago, but talking about infections, toxicants, and mold exposures, these things can create so much neurological damage and we don't realize that it's not coming from up here, but it's coming from, other areas of the body. So, what's interesting too is neurological symptoms. They can create other symptoms, right? So neurological issues can create joint pain. It can create foot and hand pain. It can create GI dysfunction. So remember, the GI dysfunction can create neurological issues and vice versa. So really understanding, again, going back to understanding the root cause. So we might want to do a neural zoomer, but we might also want to do a gut zoomer to really have that, complete picture of the body, so we know what it is that we're looking at and what we're dealing with. We got to know what we're dealing with in order to address, the root cause, right? So we live in an environment where we can't really control what's in our outside air, unfortunately, unless we just, move way out to the mountains or something like that, or to an island. A lot of that stuff that, we can't control. But the things that we can control is what's in our home, what we put in our body, what we put on our skin. This is so important, is what we put on our skin. Just as important as what we're putting on our body. So often we're thinking about, okay, I eat good, healthy, organic food, but then I go and I put, sort of mainstream lotions on my skin that can be hormone disruptors. Hormones play a key role in brain health. Estrogen, testosterone, progesterones, DHEA, all of these things play a really significant role in brain health. And we need to have those good, healthy hormones. And if we have any kind of endocrine disruption, which is hormone dysfunction, right? If we are, full of estrogen mimickers, right? So we've got these estrogen mimickers, they're called xenoestrogens. There are metalloestrogens, heavy metals that look like estrogen to the body. Even mycoestrogens, right? So mycotoxins, mold that looks like estrogen to the body and throws our endocrine system way off, throws our estrogens way off, and creates lots of problems, which can impact and often will impact brain function. So this is something to consider as we are, when we're young, but also as we're aging, and especially for us women, as we're moving through perimenopause and menopause, and we start to see these neurological changes. Do we need to look at hormone function? Do we need to look at xenoestrogens and these other estrogen mimickers to see if it's playing a role in dysfunction? Do we need to understand, which I think we do, that when we are low in progesterone, we're low in estrogen, that it will impact our cardiovascular health. It will impact our neurological function. Remember, everything is connected. And so we have to remember that everything's connected, and that it's that what's the root cause? I'm going to say it 100 times over. What is the root cause? And sometimes we've got to dig a little bit for it. Okay, so other things, we're talking about things that can, a few minutes ago when I said that neurological dysfunction can create other problems, right? Can create these systemic issues. So it can be that they create joint pain, right? So neurological dysfunction can also throw off your endocrine system. So it can create skin disorders. So is there something going on in your nervous system that is manifesting as skin disorders? Mood disorders and depression. This is so important. We have so many people on antidepressants when depression, anxiety is often, if not all the time, I can't say everything's 100% right, but so often it's an inflammatory disorder. It's an inflammatory response. So again, why is there inflammation? It's manifesting in people as depression, as anxiety. What can we do to dig for the answers instead of covering up with drugs, right? So I'm not saying that sometimes drugs aren't going to play a key role in helping us to manage symptoms, but that's what they're doing. they often help us manage symptoms, but it's not addressing the root cause. And so if we need to take, pharmaceuticals for a period of time, we have got to, in my mind, everybody makes their own choices, right? But in my mind, we take the pharmaceuticals for a short period of time as we're trying to understand what's going on, address that, and then come off the pharmaceuticals. How are we going to support the body and decrease inflammation? How are we going to move more, sleep more, meditate more, eat better? All of these things, again, going back to the amount of control that we have over the choices that we make that can help us to address the symptoms that we're having. And so let's see, other things. We kind of hit on this already, but when we have inflammation, it impacts energy production and brain endurance. And so if you're finding that, we said this a little while ago, but if you're driving and you're unable to drive for long periods of time, if you're reading and after 15 or 20 minutes you're fatigued and you want to go to sleep, those are things that are symptoms, right? We should be able to read and study for periods of time. But if unless, it's your bedtime, right? So things to consider. If you're in bed and it's your bedtime, then maybe you're just tired, so go to bed. But if you read, if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're reading and after 15, 20 minutes you're fatigued, then consider that that's a symptom. It's a neurological symptom. And so we want to, again, support the body, decrease inflammation, and allow the body, the brain to function properly. We talked about autoimmunity, but one of the things that can happen often is, when we don't realize that there is an autoimmune reaction, there's antibody activity against the brain, is there are things that can happen is, yes, poor brain function, but there are other symptoms like dizziness, right? There can be burning sensations in the hands and the feet. So, we think, okay, well, that's neuropathy. It's neurological often, right? There's something going on that is creating this burning. So yes, it certainly can be. And remember, this is all connected. I was going to say, we see neuropathies a lot in diabetics. Well, it's because the blood sugar, the blood is sticky, like it makes everything sticky, it makes organs sticky, it's going to make your brain sticky. Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. So it's all going back to an inflammatory response. So the neuropathies, what if we start to address the inflammatory response, take supplements that are going to reduce inflammation, like therapeutically reduce inflammation, and eat well. And so we start to lower our blood glucose levels, we start to lower our stress levels, and we start to lower the impact that it has on a neurological function, which then the neuropathies start to decrease, which is, obviously the goal. So many of these things we can reverse. We have the ability to reverse dysfunction. It's not always easy, but we can. So there's this interesting, kind of going into interventions a little bit and ways that we can reduce inflammation, neurological inflammation, as well as systemic inflammation. One of the things that I find super interesting is, we hear a lot about, GABA. So GABA is a neurotransmitter, it's relaxing, and there are a lot of supplements out there with GABA in it. Now, I follow, this information comes from Dr. Datis Karazian. If you don't know him, you should. He's just, one of those super smarty pants people. But the thing to understand, so we hear the term leaky gut all the time, right? If you haven't heard it, essentially it's the cells of your gut that are coming apart and it's allowing particles, food, bacteria, whatever it is, through into the bloodstream too soon, so it creates an immune response. It's not supposed to be there. So if we are struggling with leaky gut, we may or we may not know it. We're probably also struggling with leaky brain. We have, permeability of the blood-brain barrier. We can also have permeability of the endothelial and the epithelial tissue, which is your cardiovascular system, right? So your epithelium is sure your skin, but also is your GI, is kind of turned inside out. But then you think of your cardiovascular system, which is your endothelium. And so if you have inflammation, it's going to impact this epithelial and endothelial lining, which is super problematic. So there's a challenge that you can do. GABA should not, the size of the molecule is too large to pass through the blood-brain barrier, right? It's not, we don't often know that, we don't realize that. And for some people, GABA doesn't work, which is a good thing. Interestingly, because if GABA works for you, it means that you have a permeable, you have brain permeability, because the molecules are actually getting through the blood-brain barrier. So this is a challenge that you can do. You know, that's pretty simple. If it doesn't work for you, you're golden. If it does work for you, then you've got a deeper issue to address. So I find that interesting, you know, because really for a lot of people, going and taking GABA is just a waste of money. But if you're doing it specifically for a challenge, I think it's very intriguing to do this. So it's Tatis Karazian, who was where I learned this, and I think it's fascinating the things that we can do to understand our own bodies at a deeper level, besides just testing, which is sort of the best. But the other thing that we wanted to make sure that we do, so we talk about metals a lot. We talk about the toxins in the environment and how they can build up in the body. Oftentimes, so we can take supplements that can help to pull out toxins, right? We can support mitochondrial function, we can support detoxification, but sometimes there is a point for a lot of people, especially with certain variants who don't detoxify metals well. They can build up and create more and more symptoms, whether it's neurological symptoms or any other type of symptom. And so what we often do, what we can do is go and do IV chelation therapy, which I think is great, but we have to be careful. And so if this is something that you're considering, right, I want you to have as much knowledge as possible, and I want you to do your own research, but we've got to be really careful, because with chelation therapy, it starts to pull out these metals, which mobilizes these toxins. It can mobilize toxins in the brain and can create more symptoms. And so we want to be really careful about chelation therapy, whether it's you're doing it through supplementation, or really, if you want to do it hardcore, you got to do the chelation therapy, the IV chelation therapy. But just be aware and be very, very careful. And I'll tell you too, when I'm working with clients, I do a lot of these types of protocols. Now, obviously, I can't do IV therapy at this point, but what I want to make sure of is that anybody who I'm working with, their body is prepared. It's prepared to eliminate those toxins. And so when I say that, there are protocols that are called, drainage pathway openers, right? We want to open up drainage pathways so we know that the detoxification systems are working properly, right? So drainage pathways are going to be the lymphatic system, obviously, the liver and kidney and, pooping every day. All of these things, your skin, all of these are detoxification pathways. We got to make sure that they're working properly, so when we start to mobilize toxins, parasites, microbes that also hold on to toxins, we want to make sure that you're getting rid of them as soon as possible, because what we don't want is to mobilize all of these critters and these toxins, but you're not able to eliminate them. So they mobilize and they jump around, and you get all of these crazy symptoms, and it can be really miserable. And then they just go back and sit in the tissues. So we've got to be really careful about that. We've got to make sure that we're following protocols strategically, systematically, so we know that what we're doing is going to be beneficial and get you where you want to be. So Pretty simple things that can be important that we struggle with a lot. Sleep. Sleep is such an important healing process, detoxification process. This is how our body calms. Now the brain continues to work, right? It's always working, but this is how, sleep is one of the most therapeutic things we can do, and so many people struggle with sleep. Why? There are lots and lots of different reasons why. You got to find out why, but you got to get good sleep. Figure out what's going on, figure out what you can do to get your good 7, 8, maybe 9 hours of sleep, depending on who you are. Everybody's a little bit different. So make sure you're sleeping, make sure you're managing your stress. I talk about this a lot. It kind of goes back to, the very beginning of the show when we're talking about gratitude is managing your stress. And we can manage stress by being grateful. We can manage stress by prayer time, by meditation time, by walking on the earth, right? Walking in the grass, by being in the sun. All of these things calm the nervous system. We're in a society where we're always on the go, we're always stressed, we're eating on the run. We've got financial struggles, or we've got relational struggles, or we've got business struggles. It's always something, and we feel overwhelmed and inundated, and the body doesn't handle that well. So we can't always get rid of some of these outside stressors, but we can take the time, whether it's sitting in the shower, whether it's, going and locking your door, whatever you can do to be still, to go inside. I think we talked about this on the last show, is meditation and prayer time. It's all a practice. People tell me all the time, I can't meditate. You can. It's just about being still. Your brain is not intended to turn off. It doesn't just turn off. But going somewhere and being still and putting the phone away, even when you're eating, right? If you're eating, putting the phone away, turning the TV off, hanging out with your family, going outside. I do that a lot. I'll go outside and eat and sit in the sun. So I'm trying to do multiple things at once, right? I'm being still, I'm sitting in the sun, I'm eating my food in a calm state. So that's going to help us digest our food a lot better also. So, these simple things that are free, for one, and can make huge impacts on systemic inflammation, on neurological inflammation, on digesting our food, right? If we're not digesting our food, we become micronutrient deficient, we become macronutrient deficient, and then, organ systems don't work, creating more inflammation. So we have these kind of these vicious cycles that happen, and we've got to find a spot to where we just say, okay, I'm stopping it here, and then you just work your way around, right? Nobody's perfect, but find that point to where you can stop the vicious cycle. So there are interesting supplements. I believe that food is key, as well as all these other lifestyle factors. They are key to managing symptoms, to managing the inflammatory response, to managing all these things. But we do often get to a point to where we have to take supplements therapeutically. And they can be different supplements in different amounts for different people. So it's one of those things where, going back to what I said a little while ago about the supplement protocols that I put together, they're really good, but they're not individualized. And so we've got to know your body and what you can handle. There's one supplement for me that I take pretty frequently, and it's called Acetyl CH. Acetyl by Apex Energetics. I don't have it on this protocol because it's an intense supplement. I started taking it a while back, and I could really feel it, and really feel it in, sort of in the brain function. It was this really off feeling. But what I know about that particular product is if you start feeling that, it's because your brain capacity, the brain function isn't where it needs to be. So I had to build up. And so now I know how much to take and when to take it, and it helps me to focus and helps me to get through. And I know that this is something that, for me personally, that I need in order to support brain health and brain function. So I tell you that because we can sometimes have what we view as a negative effect to a supplement, when really it's telling us a story. And so we want to pay attention to this story and pay attention to our body and what our body is trying to tell us. So just because we have a negative effect from a supplement doesn't mean it's actually negative. We just might need to alter it a bit. But this is why supplements are so individualized, and you've got to be so careful with them, and you don't just take them for granted that because they're natural they are, they can't hurt you, or because they're natural they, can't, create issues, especially if you don't need them. So knowing what you're taking, why you're taking them, and that leads me to ask, right? If somebody tells you, and this comes to me because I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, somebody came to me and said, I was put on these supplements and she didn't tell me why she put me on them. She just said, you have to take these. I think that's not fair, for one. Some people don't want to know the amount of information that I want to know, and I a lot of times will overshare. I'm like, I want you to know everything that I know, especially when it has to do with your body, because you need to know your body. But it's not fair for me to say you need to take this and not explain why. And that's what happened with this friend of mine. And so take on a role of, this is your body and your life, and ask the question, ask why. I'll say that about, everything that we deal with, always ask why. So if somebody tells you have to take a supplement, ask why. If somebody tells you you're dealing with this particular symptom, ask why, right? Always dig deeper as much as you possibly can. So there's some pretty cool supplements out there. There's one called Nerf2 Activator. They activate essentially the antioxidant defense system, right? They can reduce inflammation. You might have heard of these before, but Nerf2 activators are really important for neurological health, for antioxidant capacity, you name it. So it's in the protocol that I have, but it's, we have to have antioxidants to support all of the oxidative stress that goes on in the body. So oxidative stress is normal and natural. Now we can get to where it's too much, and if we don't have the antioxidants to squash that fire, then it's problematic, right? But we want to, understanding that there's a balance, right? There's a balance between inflammation and anti-inflammation, right? There's a balance between oxidative stress and having good amount of antioxidative capacity. There's another component called apigenin. This is something that I heard of years ago, but I couldn't find it in any product, and except for, I can't even remember, a Swanson or something. I don't even know this. I don't know the company, but I ordered it because it's what some will believe is a good anti-cancer component to oncological protocol, right? So, but apigenin is highest in parsley. So, parsley is one of those things that we see it, it comes to us is because it's pretty on a plate, but then we throw it away. And parsley is really, really healthy, and there's a lot of apigenin in it. So there are Apex has one of their one of their supplements that has apigenin in it that is a neurological supplement. So I love that about Apex. It's unique in what it is. It is becoming more well known, but it is a really important neurological supplement. Resveratrol. Resveratrol is anti-inflammatory, it's anti-aging, it supports brain function. Resveratrol is great. It's not the best idea to get your resveratrol through wine. It's in grape skins. So, getting it therapeutically should be in supplement form, but eat your grapes. Grapes are fine. Now, if you're struggling with blood sugar dysregulation, then yeah, you've got to, kind of modify, your fruit intake. But, resveratrol therapeutically is an amazing supplement for brain health as well as, anti-inflammatory. There are others, there's rutin, there's catechins, there's curcumin, another solid anti-inflammatory. There are a couple of supplements that I really like. One is a resveratrol supplement and one's a curcumin supplement. And they're both Apex. I'm talking a lot about Apex Energetics today. I really like their products. There are couple of lines that I really like, but these two together, it's almost like taking an Advil. You can take it in large amounts and it can squash inflammation and squash that fire quickly. So I would get, I would have some neck pain, go up into my head. I always tell people I'm biochemically sound, but, biomechanically kind of a mess. I get a curve in my spine and, TMD and all these different things. But, I do the things that I need to do. But sometimes if I have a headache, if I take a bunch of curcumin and a bunch of resveratrol, it's gone within 15 minutes. So amazing what these things can do, and they're healthy and they're not Advil. Advil's damaging and problematic. Other things that we can do, of course, are your omegas. Omega-3, specifically DHA for brain health, that's one of the things that I've started doing over the last few months, is really high dosing DHA specifically. I want to ensure that my brain function continues throughout the rest of my life. I know my genetics and I know my potential. And so that is a focus for me, is my neurological health and being able to think clearly and to speak clearly and to continue to work with clients and to continue to learn and educate and teach, right? So I want to know that my brain capacity and function is at its peak. So I keep working on these things and I keep studying and I keep doing the anti-inflammatories. And so omega-3 fatty acids, specifically high dose DHA, is a really, really great thing to do. Magnesium is one of those things where there are different forms of magnesium and they have different functions in the body, right? So magnesium can be great for GI function. It can be great for, helping you eliminate. It can be great for muscle tightness, right? And helping you sleep. But there's one specifically called magnesium threonate that is magnesium attached to an amino acid called threonine. And so magnesium does not pass through the blood-brain barrier well, if at all, not sure. But what I know is that when it's attached to this amino acid threonine, it pulls it into the brain tissue and through the blood-brain barrier. So this can be really important for people who are struggling with cognitive issues, who have the potential maybe for Alzheimer's disease or dementia, right? So this is a great supplement. It's one that I do. I've done it for years now. But magnesium threonate, taking this therapeutically, probably I'll do it for the rest of my life because I know that I want to support my brain cognitive function. And this is one of the things that anybody who comes to me who is either struggling or concerned, that's one of the things that we're going to do, as well as a lot of these other things that we're talking about. They're so important. We can go into B vitamins. We can do micronutrient testing that helps us understand where your micronutrients are, and it's different in serum levels versus intracellularly. So if we say we do a B12 test through, you go to your doctor and say, okay, will you test my B12? What they're doing is they're testing the serum levels of B12. What we want to do, it's fine, but it's not the end all be all, because if it's not getting into the cell, then it's not doing its job. So that's where nutrients do their job, is once they get into the cell. So we can look at serum levels, that gives us a little bit of information, but we want to do a micronutrient test that actually looks intracellularly, so we know that what's moving around in the serum is actually also getting into the cell. I have a client and this was just a couple of weeks ago, but we did a micronutrient panel on him, and all of his serum levels were pretty normal. We look at intracellularly, he's tanked on all of them. Why? He's a healthy guy, right? He just came to me for, some optimization and some learning about his body and, what can he do to make sure that he ages well. Well, so what we see is that there's some kind of cellular dysfunction going on. And so he's eating well, he's doing all of these good things, he's taking these nutrients, but if they're not getting into the cell, it's really kind of a waste of money. And so we move into doing a cellular supportive protocol, so we know that what we're doing to support the rest of his body and his aging process and his brain function, we know that it's getting into the cell and actually doing its job. So we can look at B vitamins that way. We can look at antioxidants. We can look at minerals. We can look at your omega-3, omega-6 ratios. All of these things are really important, and we can see all of this in this micronutrient test. It's fascinating stuff. There are antioxidants and mitochondrial supportive nutrients like carnitine. So carnitine is super interesting because it's an amino acid, but it's the only amino acid that actually pulls fat into the cell for mitochondrial function, right? And so we get carnitine. It's considered conditionally essential, which means our body should make some amount of carnitine, but we also, the only place for us to get carnitine is through meat. And so consider that epigenetic variants, there may be some variants that don't allow us to produce carnitine, or we're not utilizing carnitine, or if we're not eating meat to get carnitine, this can be a problem for our mitochondrial health. So we've got to have good carnitine for mitochondrial health, which is going to be, of course, heart health, brain function, you go on down the list. So carnitine is one of those things that, if we see mitochondrial dysfunction, like, okay, carnitine it is, as well as CoQ10. Some of these things we just know, okay, this is what you need in order to support your mitochondria and cellular health and cellular function. Let's see. Wow, I think we're kind of at our end. I know I wanted to hit a little bit on hormones. We talked a little bit about it a few minutes ago. I think that what I want to say about hormones and the importance of hormone balance in the body and how it relates to neurological health and brain function is understanding that when our hormones are off, it affects our brain function. There are a couple of things. So, okay, for one, keep this in mind. Cholesterol is necessary for hormone production. So if you are on a statin, it's going to impact cholesterol, it's going to impact hormone function, right? So we have to keep these things in mind. We've got to understand the downstream effects of what it is we're doing, whether it's pharmaceutical or whether it's supplementation, it doesn't matter. We need to understand the downstream effects to the best of our ability. So keeping that in mind, and I'm going to say too, multiple occasions over the last few weeks, I have had people tell me that they've been placed on these cholesterol-lowering drugs and are struggling because they hurt, struggling because they're not thinking clearly, and they don't put the two together. So if you have pain in your joints, pain in your feet, if you have muscle pain, things that you don't understand why they're happening, if you're on a statin, talk to your doctor, find out if that's what it is. There is a genetic variant that is called ApoE4, that people just don't do well with statins. And so if you are getting symptoms, then talk to your doctor and see what else you can do about this pain, because that's not normal. You should not be having pain, okay? Let's see. So a couple of things that I wanted to hit on as far as hormonal imbalances and neurotransmitters specifically. I find this interesting because we don't often, I'm talking about it now, but we don't often put the two together, that our neurotransmitters and our brain function are impacted by our hormone health. And so for both men and women, estrogen impacts serotonin. Okay, so serotonin is our happy hormone. If we don't have enough estrogen, what's going to happen to our serotonin? Okay, so let's see what else. Progesterone plays a key role in modulating GABA receptors. Okay. Estrogen and dopamine receptors. So estrogen influences dopamine receptors, which is, of course, is essential for motivation, reward, and focus. So not enough estrogen is going to impact your dopamine. Testosterone also has an impact on dopamine receptors for men. And then estrogen is also involved in regulating acetylcholine receptors, which are vital for memory and learning. So remember, I was talking about acetylcholine. That's what I'm taking for myself, acetyl-CH. And if we don't have enough estrogen, it's going to impact our acetylcholine receptors. So the same with testosterone in men. Testosterone is going to impact their acetylcholine receptors. And then thyroid hormones impact all neurotransmitters. So if our thyroid is not functioning properly for whatever reason, ask why. Always ask why. But our thyroid hormones impact, well, we have thyroid hormone receptors on every cell of the body. So the thyroid is so important, but it works with everything. And so we've got to understand that if our thyroid is not functioning properly, we're probably going to have some neurological issues. We're probably going to have some brain fog. Likely we'll have some depression. So we don't want to, if we're, going back to what I said earlier, if we're struggling with depression, don't just assume it's just depression. Ask why, right? There's an inflammatory response, which could be from thyroid dysregulation, from micronutrient deficiencies, from all of these things that play together. We want to find a way out of that and not just covering it up with drugs and antidepressants. So I think we're at the end. I hope that you found this helpful. I always just find it fascinating. You know, I think brain health, brain function is super fascinating. It is misunderstood, I think, by a lot of us. And, my hope is that if you are struggling with any kind of, symptoms, period, but any kind of neurological symptom, find somebody who can help you to dig. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Let's dig into what's going on so you can address the underlying cause, reduce inflammation, and move on from it. That's really what it's all about, right? We're here to live big, to give, to serve, to do all of these things. When we don't feel well, it makes it hard. If our brain's not functioning well, it makes it hard. So let me know if you have questions. Let me know if there's a topic that you want me to cover. I'm happy to, if I'm comfortable with it. Obviously, you can go to my website, tastelifenutrition.com. There you'll find a assessment that you can fill out. I'll reach out to you. We'll discuss it and see if I might be able to help, if I have other questions, or if there's somebody I know who might be a better person for you to reach out to. I've got a pretty extensive network of amazing resources, amazing practitioners who are just really fabulous at what they do. So my goal is for you to get the help that you need, whatever that looks like, right? And get the information that you need. Even if you don't need help, just get the information. So feel free to reach out, go to the website. You can find Taste Life Nutrition all over social media. You'll find us here streaming live on KUHS Denver every Thursday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, where sometimes it's just me. A lot of times we have really amazing guests who also are here to serve and to share and have really good information for you. So that's my goal with all of this, is to bring you the best of what I know, bring you the best of what is out there. So there's, that there are lots of choices, lots of options to help you get to where you want to be, to help you to get to where you need to be. All right, have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.